Hey there, friend. If you're reading this, you've just stumbled upon a story that's going to take you on a roller coaster of emotions, anger, laughter, heartbreak, and maybe even a little hope. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Ready? Let's dive in. You know how they say life is all about choices? Well, I didn't realize how true that was until one fateful night at my parents' dinner table. My name's Julia Bennett, and up until that point, I thought I had it all figured out, or at least as much as anyone can in their mid-20s. I worked hard, paid my dues, and tried to keep my family afloat financially. But looking back now, I see that I was living someone else's dream instead of my own. That night started like any other. My dad, Greg, a man who could charm his way through a room but couldn't handle a budget to save his life, was talking about Ethan's upcoming graduation party. Ethan, my younger brother, sat smugly across the table, scrolling through Instagram posts of lavish parties thrown by kids whose parents probably owned yachts or something. "We need to make this special," Dad said, pounding the table for emphasis. "This is Ethan's big moment." I rolled my eyes so hard I think I saw my brain. Special? Sure, if special meant bankrupting us. But before I could open my mouth, Mom, quiet, ever peacekeeping Linda, gave me the look. You know the one. The don't start anything look. So I kept quiet for now. Little did I know, that dinner would be the last time I'd sit at that table. So here's the thing about being the responsible child, people expect you to fix everything. And honestly, for a long time I didn't mind. I mean, somebody had to step up, right? After college, when money got tight and Dad refused to cut back on his ridiculous spending habits, like buying a new lawnmower every year because apparently grass grows differently now, I became the unofficial family CFO. But let me tell you, it wasn't easy. Every paycheck felt like it disappeared into some black hole of bills, groceries, and random emergencies. Still, I managed to squirrel away a small savings fund for emergencies, you know? A safety net. Something just for me. Which is why, when Dad casually dropped the bombshell during dessert, "Julia, we'll need $5,000 from you for Ethan's party," I nearly choked on my brownie. $5,000. That was practically my entire emergency fund. "Dad," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you have any idea how much work goes into saving that kind of money?" He waved me off like I was swatting at an annoying fly. "It's just money, Julia. Family comes first. Family comes first. Yeah, sure. Unless you're the one sacrificing everything for them, apparently." By the third day of nonstop nagging about the party money, I was done. Like, full-on done. I love my family. I really do. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes, love means setting boundaries. The argument that finally broke us happened over breakfast. Dad came storming into the kitchen, holding a printout of some Pinterest-worthy party setup he'd found online. "Look at this, Julia!" he barked, slapping the paper down in front of me. "This is what we're aiming for. Classy, elegant, memorable." I stared at the picture, dumbfounded. There were string lights, gourmet catering, and a photo booth complete with props. It looked like a Hollywood premiere, not a high school graduation party. "And how exactly are we paying for this?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You already know the answer to that," he snapped. "No, Dad. No. I'm not giving you my savings just so Ethan can have bragging rights on social media." The room went silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Dad exploded. "If you won't support your family, then maybe you don't belong here." And just like that, I was homeless. Being kicked out of your childhood home is surreal. 1 minute, you're part of the fabric of the place, the person who knows where the spare keys are hidden and which drawer holds the mismatched silverware, and the next, you're standing outside with a suitcase and nowhere to go. Thankfully, Mia, my best friend since middle school, took me in without hesitation. She lives in a tiny studio apartment downtown, but she cleared out half her closet and made space for me on her futon. "You okay?" she asked that first night, handing me a mug of chamomile tea. I shrugged, staring blankly at the wall. "I don't know. I guess I should feel angry or sad or something, but mostly I just feel relieved." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Relieved?" "Yeah," I admitted. Like, yeah, this sucks, but also maybe it's better this way. Maybe I needed to leave. She nodded thoughtfully. Well, whatever happens, you've got me. We'll figure it out together. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Meanwhile, back at the Bennett household, things weren't going quite as smoothly. Without my financial contributions, Dad was scrambling to cover the basics, let alone throw the extravagant bash he'd promised. By the time Ethan's party rolled around, it was clear that the whole thing was going to be a disaster. Instead of gourmet catering, there were cheap sandwiches from the deli. Instead of professional decorators, Mom spent hours hanging streamers herself. And instead of impressed guests, everyone showed up looking confused, as if they'd accidentally wandered into the wrong house. Ethan, predictably, lost it. "This is your fault!" he screamed at Dad after most of the guests left early. "Everyone's gonna think I'm a loser now." Dad didn't say much. He just stood there looking defeated. For once, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Let me tell you something about living in a studio apartment with your best friend. It's cozy, but it's also real. Like, there's no escaping each other. You learn pretty quickly to be considerate of personal space and noise levels. And trust me, when Mia started blasting her favorite K-pop playlist at 7 a.m., I realized just how much patience this whole adulting thing required. But despite the cramped quarters and occasional awkwardness, staying with Mia was exactly what I needed. She didn't just give me a place to crash, she gave me perspective. For example, one night after work, we sat cross-legged on the floor eating instant ramen because priorities and talking about life. "You know," Mia said between slurps, "this might actually be a blessing in disguise." I raised an eyebrow. "How is getting kicked out of my house a blessing?" "Because now you get to decide what your life looks like," she explained. "No more putting everyone else first. No more sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate it. This is your chance to build something that's completely yours." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Up until then, I'd been so focused on surviving, finding a new job, saving money, figuring out where I belonged, that I hadn't stopped to think about what I truly wanted. What did Julia want? Not Julia the daughter, or Julia the sister, or Julia the family bank account, but just Julia. It was scary as hell, but also kind of exciting. The next morning, I woke up determined to take control of my future. I mean, sure, I was broke and technically homeless, but I still had skills, and skills pay bills, right? So I dusted off my laptop and started researching freelance opportunities. Turns out, there's a surprising demand for bookkeepers and accountants who can help small businesses manage their finances. Who knew? I spent hours crafting a professional LinkedIn profile, reaching out to old clients from my previous job, and even designing a simple website to showcase my services. Within a week, I landed my first client, a local coffee shop owner named Rachel who needed help organizing her books before tax season. She was hesitant at first. "Are you sure you can handle this?" But once I showed her how much money she could save by tracking expenses properly, she hired me on the spot. That first paycheck felt different, not just because it was mine alone, but because it represented freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't working to keep someone else afloat. I was working for me. Of course, just when things were starting to look up, drama found its way back into my life. It came in the form of a phone call from Mom. "Julia!" Her voice trembled on the line. "Can we talk?" My stomach dropped. Mom never called unless something was wrong. "What happened?" "It's your father," she whispered. He lost his job." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "How?" "He got into another argument with his boss," she admitted. "Something about cutting corners on projects. They fired him yesterday." Great. Just great. As if losing the house wasn't bad enough, now they were facing financial ruin. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for them, to rush over and bail them out like I always had, but another part reminded me why I left in the first place. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said firmly, "but I can't fix this for you guys. You need to figure it out yourselves." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, softly, she replied, "You're right. We do." Hearing those words from her lips almost made me cry. Almost. A few weeks later, I came home from meeting a new client to find Ethan sitting on Mia's futon, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. "What are you doing here?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. He glanced up, looking sheepish. Hey, Julia. Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "About what?" "Look, I know I screwed up, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. I shouldn't have sided with Dad that night, and I definitely shouldn't have treated you like crap afterward. For a moment, I just stared at him. Ethan apologizing? That was a first. And? I prompted. And, he sighed heavily. Things at home are falling apart. Dad's pissed all the time, Mom's barely speaking to anyone, and I don't know what to do anymore. I thought maybe you could help. I shook my head. Ethan, I can't keep fixing things for you guys. You need to grow up and take responsibility for yourselves. He nodded slowly. I get that. But does that mean we're done? As a family, I mean. His vulnerability caught me off guard. 4 years, I'd resented Ethan for being spoiled and selfish, but seeing him like this, lost and unsure, made me realize he was just a kid trying to navigate adulthood without a map. No, I said finally. We're not done. But things are going to be different from now on. Fast forward 6 months, and my life looked nothing like it used to. I moved out of Mia's apartment and rented a tiny studio downtown, a real upgrade from sleeping on a futon. My freelance business was thriving, thanks to word-of-mouth referrals and glowing reviews from satisfied clients. But the biggest change wasn't external, it was internal. I'd learned to prioritize myself, to say no when necessary, to set boundaries, and to trust that I was capable of handling whatever life threw my way. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I pulled out my journal and wrote a letter to my younger self. Dear Julia, I began, I know you feel stuck right now, like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. But someday, you'll realize that the only person you need to save is you. And when you do, everything will fall into place. As I closed the notebook, I smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was mine. You know that feeling when you think you've finally got your life under control, and then the universe decides to throw you a curveball? Yeah, that happened to me one Friday afternoon. I was in the middle of balancing my books for a client, a task I'd come to find oddly soothing, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find none other than BENNETT himself. My dad, standing on my doorstep, looking, well, let's just say he wasn't his usual smug self. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Julia, he said, his voice unusually soft. Can we talk? Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. After everything he'd done, kicking me out, accusing me of being selfish, refusing to listen to reason, I didn't know him anything. But another part of me, the part that still remembered him teaching me how to ride a bike or cheering at my high school graduation, couldn't turn him away. Fine, I said flatly, stepping aside. But make it quick. He sat down awkwardly on my futon, fidgeting with his hands like a kid caught stealing cookies. Listen, I messed up, he admitted. With you. With the family. Everything. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. Go on. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone, he continued, his voice cracking slightly. But I see now that I was wrong. About the party, about the money, about everything. And I'm sorry. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. Was this really my father apologizing? Or was it some ploy to get me to fork over more cash? You're going to have to do better than that, I said finally. He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. I know. And I will. Starting today. After Dad left, I spent hours replaying our conversation in my head. Was I ready to forgive him? Honestly, I wasn't sure. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It's earned, bit by bit, through actions rather than words. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep letting my past dictate my future. 4 years, I defined myself by my role in the family, as the responsible one, the fixer, the person everyone relied on. Now, I was learning to define myself on my own terms. That realization hit me hardest during a casual coffee date with Mia. We were sitting outside her favorite cafe, sipping lattes and people watching, when she turned to me and asked, So, what's next for you? What do you mean? I replied, stirring sugar into my drink. I mean, you've built this amazing business, you're living on your own, and you're finally putting yourself first. What's the next big goal? I froze, realizing I hadn't thought that far ahead. For so long, my focus had been survival, making ends meet, keeping the peace, avoiding disaster. But now, I had options. I don't know yet, I admitted. But whatever it is, it's going to be something just for me. Mia grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. A few days later, I received an unexpected text from Ethan. Hey Julia, it read. Can we grab lunch sometime? There's something I want to show you. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet him at a diner near my apartment. When I arrived, he was already seated, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. What's up? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. He took a deep breath. Okay, so, remember how I told you I got a job at the grocery store? I nodded. Yeah, stocking shelves, right? Well, turns out I kinda suck at it, he admitted sheepishly. But while I was working there, I met this guy who owns a landscaping business. He offered to teach me the ropes if I wanted to learn. And you said yes? Yeah, he said, his face lighting up. It's hard work, but it's fun. Plus, I'm actually good at it. Like really good. I smiled, genuinely proud of him for once. That's awesome, Ethan. I'm happy for you. Thanks, he replied. And hey, maybe someday I'll start my own business. You could help me with the books or something. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope for my brother. Maybe he wasn't as hopeless as I'd thought. The following weekend, Mom called to invite me over for dinner. She and Dad had moved into a modest rental apartment after losing the house, and though I'd spoken to her occasionally since leaving, I hadn't seen her in months. When I arrived, the place was small but cozy, a stark contrast to the sprawling home I'd grown up in. Mom greeted me with a warm hug, holding on longer than usual. I'm glad you came, she said softly. We sat down at the kitchen table, where she served homemade lasagna and garlic bread. As we ate, she filled me in on their new life. How Dad had started temp work, how they were learning to live within their means, and how much she missed having me around. I know I didn't stand up for you when you needed me most, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Julia. You're stronger than anyone I know. Her words brought tears to my own eyes. For so long, I'd craved her approval, her support. Hearing her say those things now meant more than I could put into words. Thank you, Mom, I whispered. That means a lot. To celebrate my 1-year anniversary of starting my freelance business, I threw a small gathering at my studio apartment. It wasn't fancy, just pizza, wine, and a playlist of cheesy 90s hits, but it was perfect. As I looked around the room at my friends, colleagues, and even Mia dancing like nobody was watching, I felt a sense of belonging I'd never experienced before. These people weren't just acquaintances, they were my chosen family. At one point, Mia raised her glass for a toast. Here's to Julia, she said, smiling brightly. The strongest, smartest, most badass woman I know. May the next chapter of your life be even better than the last. Everyone cheered, and I couldn't help but laugh through happy tears. Later that night, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle below, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. It was December, and the holiday season had rolled around again. For years, I dreaded this time of year, not because I didn't love Christmas, but because it always came with expectations. Expectations to spend money we didn't have, to attend gatherings filled with tension, and to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. This year, though, things were different. I had my own traditions now, like baking cookies with Mia while blasting Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You on repeat. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. That changed when Mom called to invite me to a small family dinner. Just us, she promised. No pressure. I hesitated at first, but curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived at their apartment, I was surprised by how normal everything felt. There was no arguing, no passive-aggressive comments, just good food and quiet conversation. Even Dad seemed subdued, offering me a tentative smile as I walked in. After dinner, Mom handed me a gift, a photo album filled with pictures from my childhood. Flipping through it, I found memories I'd forgotten, birthday parties, family vacations, silly moments captured on film. We might not have been perfect, Mom said softly, but we loved you. And we still do. For once, I believed her. New Year's Eve marked another milestone in my journey. Instead of spending the night alone or working late like previous years, I joined Mia and our friends at a rooftop party downtown. As fireworks lit up the sky at midnight, I made a resolution to keep growing both personally and professionally. The next morning, hungover but happy, I sat down with my journal and wrote out my goals for the year. One stood out above the rest: to expand my business beyond bookkeeping. I wanted to offer financial coaching services, to teach others how to take control of their finances, just like I had. It was a bold move, but I was ready. Of course, progress isn't linear. A few weeks later, I ran into Greg at the grocery store. He looked older, more worn down than the last time I'd seen him. "Julia," he said, his voice tinged with guilt. "How are you?" "I'm good," I replied honestly. "You?" He shrugged. "Getting by. Listen, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you for standing your ground. It made me realize how much I needed to change." His words caught me off guard. For so long, I'd held on to anger and resentment, but now I felt nothing but pity for the man he used to be, and maybe still was. "You're welcome," I said simply before walking away. Ethan and I started meeting regularly for coffee. At first, it was awkward. We didn't exactly have a lot in common, but over time, we found common ground. He told me about his dreams of starting his own landscaping business, and I shared my plans to grow mine. One day, he surprised me with a gift: a handmade wooden planter box. "It's not much," he admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "But I made it myself. Thought you could use it for your plants or something." I smiled, touched by the gesture. "It's perfect, Ethan. Thank you." In that moment, I realized our relationship was finally shifting from obligation to genuine connection. By spring, I'd launched my financial coaching program. My first client was Rachel, the coffee shop owner who'd hired me months earlier. Watching her gain confidence in managing her finances reminded me of my own journey and how far I'd come. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I pulled out my journal and wrote a single sentence: "I am enough." It was short, simple, but profoundly true. In June, I received a letter from Mom. It was bittersweet news. She and Greg had decided to sell the rental apartment and move to Florida. "We're starting fresh," she wrote. "Not running away, but moving towards something new. I hope you understand." I did. More than anything, I wanted them to find happiness, even if it meant letting go of the life we once knew. When they left, I drove to the old neighborhood one last time. Standing in front of the house where I'd grown up, I whispered a quiet goodbye. "Thank you for shaping me," I said aloud, "but I'm ready to move forward now." By fall, my business had grown exponentially. I rented a small office space downtown and hired an assistant to help manage clients. To celebrate, I threw a launch party at a venue decorated with string lights and gourmet catering. As I stood there, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and even Ethan, I couldn't help but laugh. This was my big moment, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed of. On the anniversary of leaving home, I sat down and wrote a letter to my younger self. "Dear Julia, you won't believe this, but someday, you'll look back on these hard times and see them as blessings in disguise. Leaving home will hurt, but it will also set you free. You'll learn to trust yourself, to prioritize your needs, and to build a life that's truly yours. Don't give up. The best is yet to come." The final scene of my story takes place on a crisp autumn morning. I'm walking along a scenic trail near my apartment, the golden leaves crunching beneath my feet. For the first time in years, I feel at peace with myself, with my choices, and with the people I've left behind. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And that's all that matters. As the screen fades to black, a quote appears. "Sometimes, walking away is the bravest step forward." And with that, the story ends, not with closure, but with hope. Because sometimes, the greatest victories aren't about fixing the past, they're about creating a future worth living for.